So good evening everyone, and welcome to Shita, and welcome to this 10-day Introduction to Buddhism course. My name is Glenn, and together with Felipe over there, we'll be leading this 10-day course. I'll be doing the classroom sessions, and Felipe will be leading the meditations. So maybe to begin, we can briefly introduce ourselves, so you know who we are a little bit. I'm originally from Australia. I have a Bachelor of Science in IT, so my previous profession was the IT field. I was 10 or 12 years in IT, and then about 24 years ago I did my first course in Buddhism right here at Tushita, exactly this course. And then I went on to do 2 of these 1-month November courses at Kopan Monastery outside of Kathmandu. And then I did a 7-year study program in Buddhist philosophy in Italy. Graduated that in 2004, spent about a year in retreat after that, and then for about the last 12 or so years I've been running courses and leading retreats. I've spent a lot of time here at Tushita over those years, and Tushita is one of my favourite places to teach, and I very much enjoy leading these 10-day introduction courses, and so I'm very much looking forward to leading this one as well. So maybe Felipe can come over and briefly introduce himself.
Hello. So I'm Felipe, I'm from Bolivia, and I'm going to be meditating with you guys, hopefully doing a good job at it. So I've been spending the best part of the last 3 years here in Dharamsala, and I've been studying and trying my best to practice Buddhism, studying Buddhist philosophy in the Library of Tibetan Work and Archives, and volunteering here at Tushita, leading meditations. So I've been very interested in Buddhism ever since I got here and did my first intro course. So I hope that I can bring any kind of benefit to you guys, because we're going to be doing some meditations together. And so yeah, I really hope that you have a very good experience, as I did back when I did the first intro to Buddhism course. I can say that it really changed my life in a big sense. So hopefully we can both bring this kind of shift of mind to all of you. So I really hope really enjoy the retreat and have a very good course.
Thanks, Felipe. Just a few logistics before we begin with a brief introduction to this course. So I think you've all got the materials, so you should have got one of these books at the check-in and a booklet here. So this booklet will be following more or less the same format or the same structure as this booklet during these next 7 days of teachings. And what I'll do at the end of every day is I'll let you know which pages or the material we'll be covering for the following day. So if you'd like to read a little bit about that to prepare for the next day, that would be useful. So you've got that, and in this book, of course, a lot of the things in this book, very good book, we'll be covering during the course as well. So in your spare time, particularly after lunch breaks, might like to read through that if you have some time. That could be helpful as well. You should also all have one of these bits of paper here. It's an extra sheet, and then also a small one with Shantideva prayer on, so you'll be using that small one a little bit with Felipe in the meditations, and this one I'll be referring from time to time in my classrooms as well. So that's the material, and of course we've got 2 tables here full of books. You can also help yourself to, they're not to take away. This book of course is yours to keep, but during the 10 days if you want to read any of the other books here, you're quite welcome to read, but of course bring them back at the end of the 10 days, and don't just take them to your room and leave them there if you're not reading them, because someone else might like to read them. And also I think on this table over here there are a number of glossaries in different languages for specific terms. So if English is not your native language, you may find a book over there with some terms in your language that you can understand a little bit better the English term. So that might be useful as well. So in this course we're doing both theory and meditation, of course. Just to run through the schedule, I think Kumpen's probably mentioned that a little bit, just to have that clear. And of course the schedule is posted on the door here and over around the dining room. And for all your sessions, of course, there'll be a gong as well. So this evening is just a short introduction. And then tomorrow, for the next 6-7 days, it'll be the same schedule. And so there'll be a wake-up gong at 6 o'clock. And then the first morning session with Felipe at 6:45 to 7:30 will be meditation in here, of course, so all sessions will take place in here. Breakfast at 7:30, and then at 9 o'clock will be the first morning session with me here till 10:15, then a morning break till 10:45, and then 10:45 till 12 will be the second morning session. Break for lunch at 12, 12 till 2 is lunch break. And then from 2 till 3 each day, we'll be breaking up into small groups, doing discussion groups. I'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, how that's going to work. So that'll be from 2 to 3, and then there'll be an afternoon tea break from 3 to 3:30, and then from 3:30 till 5 there will be afternoon class here with me, and then a short break till 5, from 5 to 5:30, and then 5:30 till 6:15 a meditation session with Felipe. 6:15 will be dinner. And then 7:30 till about 8:15 will be evening session again with Felipe meditation here. So that'll be the program for the next 7 days, 6 days rather. And then the last 2 full days will be meditation days. So there'll be just meditation. I'll be leading some, Felipe will be leading some. I'll talk more about the structure of that a little bit later in the course. And then the last morning there'll be a meditation with Felipe, last meditation, some meditation advice. After breakfast, then I'll be giving a little bit of advice about how to take this home with you if you want to use it when you go back home. So that's a little bit the structure, and then of course Kumpen will be doing a wrap-up session also after that in the morning. We'll finish at 12 o'clock and have a picnic lunch on the last day. So that's the schedule, so we have that posted again in a number of places, and there'll be gongs for every session, of course. And of course this course we're running in silence, and the silence will start when we finish this session this evening until the last morning of the course. And the reason of course we're doing the silence is so that you get the most out of this course, and you'll find that if you really maintain the silence well, then you'll get much more out of the classes and much more out of the meditation sessions as well. Of course, there'll be the discussion groups from 2 to 3 where you can discuss, and plenty of opportunity to ask questions in my classes. But outside of that, to maintain that silence well, because the thing is, if you start talking, not only will you not get anywhere near as much out of this course, but you're going to spoil it for the people around you. So really maintain the silence well. And in fact, this is a very rare opportunity that you may never ever get again in your life, to be silent for 10 days. It's very rare in our modern world to even have the opportunity to be silent for 1 day, let alone 10. And I think you'll find that if you maintain the silence well, you not only get a lot out of this course, but you're going to learn a lot about yourself as well. You'll get a lot of insights into yourself and your life, and that's going to be very, very helpful. The silence we're doing, of course, is not what's sometimes called noble silence, where you have to keep your eyes down and don't look at anyone, so we're not going that strict. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can start doing hand signals and start writing notes to people, so that's not okay. So keep in your own space. If someone walks past and smiles at you, smile back, fine. But don't start communicating, because then you're dissipating and you won't get anywhere as much. So if you keep in your own space, you'll find that you'll get so much more out of this course. So that's just a little bit about logistics. Anything about logistics of the course that's not clear? I think Kumpen explained a lot about that this afternoon. Okay. So what I'd like to do now then is just this evening have a short introduction into the course. And first, just how to approach this course. What I'd really recommend, and I think Felipe will be recommending and emphasising this a lot as well in the coming days, is just Relax, relax, relax. Really take a very relaxed approach, because otherwise we get all uptight and tense. And in the classes that I'll be leading, you may find there'll be some new concepts that you've never heard about before, and you may find it's not so easy to understand. So if we have this expectation that we'll be able to understand everything that's presented in this course, I think you're just setting yourself up for a lot of frustration. So rather, have a very relaxed attitude, and the attitude of whatever we pick up in this course, be happy with that. What we don't pick up and don't understand, the next time we do a course or read about it or think about it, we'll pick up a little bit more. So there's definitely going to be a number of topics in this course that you're going to hear and need to hear about and think about many times before you get a good understanding. And also, with the meditation sessions here, remember the meditation sessions are simply about learning the different meditation techniques, and not to have this expectation of trying to have some sort of experiences, because again you're just going to get frustrated. So it's not about trying to get some sort of experiences, it's just about simply learning the various meditation practices. That's it. And also, if whatever comes up in your meditation, don't make a big deal out of it. And that's what people do, they make a big deal out of it. Because sometimes something very pleasant comes up and people go, oh, that's nice, I like that, I want that. And then they try to recreate it, and of course it goes away immediately because of that craving. And then they try and recreate it, and then it doesn't happen. They just get more and more frustrated. But then we're not doing the practice. And then sometimes something a little bit strange or even unpleasant comes up, and people go, oh, what's that? Go away, go away. And then they get a lot of worry and aversion. And then, of course, we get caught up in that. So basically, whether it's something pleasant, something strange, or even something unpleasant comes up, let it go, let it go, let it go. These things will come and they'll go, they'll come and they'll go. Don't make a big deal out of them. And just stick to the practice. So remember again, we're just learning the practices in this course. And I'm sure Felipe will mention a little bit more about this in the coming days as well. And generally, or very often in Buddhism, we talk about 3 wisdoms that we're trying to cultivate. And the first wisdom is the wisdom of hearing. And as the name suggests, of course, that's when we listen to some instructions. And also this can apply from with reading a book. So we're getting some information from an outside source. And what I very much encourage you to do is that if I say something but you don't really understand what I'm saying, maybe my accent is not clear, please ask questions. I very much like interactive classes. But with asking questions, I recommend 2 things. One is don't just ask the question, put your hand up. Because often I'll acknowledge that you want to ask a question, but I may keep talking to finish a point. And then I'll get you to ask your question. And the second point is, please keep your questions to the specific topic that we're currently discussing. Because there's all sorts of interesting questions, but then we get sidetracked. And very often what will happen is you'll ask a question and I'll say, that's coming, that's coming, that's coming. So just keep your questions to the specific topics that we're covering at that time. So that's the first wisdom, the wisdom from hearing. The second wisdom is the wisdom from contemplation. That's where we reflect and think about the things we hear. So here we can actually follow the advice from the Buddha himself, who said, please don't accept what I tell you merely out of devotion to me, but rather you need to be like a goldsmith who checks and tests the quality of the gold before accepting it. So similarly, with anything I tell you, please don't accept it just because I said so. You need to check it out. Because if you blindly accept things, that's not going to be helpful to you in your life. So you need to think about the things that I say and see whether they match your experience and whether they make sense or not. And not just blindly accept anything. That's not going to be very helpful. And also, with contemplation, modern studies show that if we don't reflect or review things that we've heard within 24 hours of hearing it, we forget 75% of everything we've heard. So we don't want to forget 75%, so therefore we're going to do a lot of questions in class, but also each day at 2 o'clock we're going to break into discussion groups where you're going to discuss the material from the previous 24 hours so that you don't forget it all. So with these two wisdoms, we can gain an intellectual understanding of a particular topic. And this is generally what we do in school and education. We go to class, we listen to the teacher, and particularly if we want to pass an exam, we really have to think about and understand the material, and so we can get an intellectual understanding of the material. But of course, here in Buddhism, we want to do more than this, because merely gaining some intellectual understanding of Buddhist ideas is not really going to change your life, because our behaviour is not driven by our intellectual understanding. Our behaviour is driven by our instinctive habits. So what we're trying to do, of course, is we want to change those habits. And for that, we need to internalise these ideas. We need to bring them into experience. And then we can start to change our life. And so a very effective way to do that, of course, is through meditation. So with meditation, of course, what we're doing is we're internalising these ideas, bringing them from understanding to experience. And in that way, we can really transform our mind and change and improve our life. If we merely leave them as intellectual ideas, I think you'll find not much is going to change in your life. In fact, you could be the smartest Buddhist scholar on the planet and be completely miserable. So therefore, we are, of course, not only doing the intellectual understanding, but we're bringing it into experience through meditation. So these are the three wisdoms that we are trying to cultivate in general in the Buddhist path, in Buddhist practice. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about meditation, because you're going to start, of course, tomorrow morning before breakfast with a meditation session with Felipe. So just to have an idea about what we mean by meditation. Meditation is a translation of a Sanskrit term bhavana. Now, what I'm going to do in these coming days is that when we're introducing important Buddhist concepts, very often I'll go back to the original Sanskrit and give you the Sanskrit term and give the etymology of that Sanskrit term, what it really means. Because one of the things that can create a lot of confusion when you hear about Buddhist ideas is simply terminology problems. Because very often these original Sanskrit terms are very precise in meaning, but often there is no word in English or other languages that has the same meaning. So then the translator's forced to pick a word that sort of is similar, but often that word in English has other meanings. And so when we hear that word, we think that meaning, when in fact it's not really that. So I want to do that. One other point here, of course, is for any of you who are native Hindi speakers, what you need to realize is that, of course, some of these Sanskrit terms are still existent in modern day Hindi, but very often they've changed in meaning. So maybe the meaning that's in Hindi now is not the same as the original Sanskrit term as used 2,000 years ago in these Buddhist texts. So you need to keep that in mind as well. So this word here, bhavana, literally means to cultivate, to familiarize. So meditation is all about cultivating and familiarizing. So when we say cultivate, we're talking about cultivating things like insight, cultivating positive qualities like love and compassion, and then familiarizing ourselves with these things that we're cultivating. So that whole process of cultivating and familiarizing, that is meditation. So what we're really talking about is transforming our mind. Now, of course, there are many different types of meditations. Many. And there are many ways of categorizing meditations. But one useful way of categorizing is we divide meditations into two types. The first type of meditation is what's called stabilizing meditation. And as the name suggests, this type of meditation is to stabilize the mind. It's to cultivate a mind that is very calm, clear, and focused. So stabilizing meditation is simply about developing our ability to focus, is developing our attention skills, sometimes called concentration practice. And often in Buddhism, this type of meditation is called Shamatha practice. And Shamatha is a Sanskrit word, which we can divide into two parts. Shama means calm. A calm mind. And ta means to remain or abide. So we're talking about cultivating a mind that is not only calm, but it's abiding, i.e. focused single-pointedly on an object. So we're talking about developing single-pointed concentration, our ability to focus on an object without becoming dull or distracted. Single-point concentration. And this practice has a lot of direct benefits. And of course, some of the direct benefits is that we're talking about here developing a calm, clear, and focused mind. So if we can do that, it means that we're going to be much more effective in everything we do in our life if we're more calm, more clear, and more focused. And therefore, we'll find there's much less agitation and stress. We'll be much more content and peace. We'll be much more mental balance, not so much agitation. We're going to become the masters of our own mind. Now, unfortunately, in the modern world, many of us are the slaves of our own mind. We're often tormented by our own minds. We're tormented by our thoughts, emotions, memories, and so forth. This practice will help us to become the masters of our own mind. But of course, from a Buddhist perspective, the main reason we do this practice is that this is the basis of all other meditations. Because if we do any other sort of meditation, and we're trying to do that practice and our mind is very distracted or half asleep, then we're not very effective in any meditation practice. So this shamatha or stabilizing meditation is the basis of all other practices, other meditation practices. And so all other ones are called what's called analytical. Or sometimes called sort of discursive meditations. And as the name suggests, analytical means we're analysing, we're investigating. And here, of course, there can be many different meditations as well. But within this class of meditations, there are really two main areas of practice. The two main areas of practice. The first of those is wisdom, to cultivate and develop our wisdom. And sometimes in the Sanskrit we see this word vipassana. Although many of you are probably more familiar with the Pali term vipassana. So vipassana, we can divide into two parts. The VI prefix means higher or superior. And pasana or pasana means to see. So vipassana practice is higher seeing, seeing beyond. And this is often translated into English as insight. Meaning gaining insight into particularly the nature of reality. So this is one of the main areas of practice in Buddhism, is this vipassana or vipassana practice, or insight practice, our wisdom practice, to develop and cultivate wisdom, particularly the wisdom or insight into the nature of reality. The other main area of analytical practice is what's called the compassion wing of practice. And here the word compassion is used in a very sort of generic sense, meaning cultivating positive qualities, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, and so forth. And so these are really the two main areas of practice that we are practicing on the basis of stabilizing meditation. So first we really need to develop cultivate a much more calm, clear, focused mind. Then with that mind, we can do vipassana practice much better, and we can cultivate the positive qualities of loving kindness, compassion, and so forth much more effectively. So these are going to be the three sort of main areas of meditation that we're going to be focusing on in this course. Any questions about this before I give a brief introduction into this shamatha practice? Yeah.
Sometimes we can do healing for others during meditation.
Healing, you mean at a physical, energetic level or at a mental level?
Oh, energetic and mental.
Energetic or mental? Or both?
I think both.
Well, meditation's not energetic or physical, so meditation's mental. So we can do healing, of course, at both levels, in both ways, and sometimes we can do them as a combination. Like physical, we do more like Reiki and all those sort of things. But here, of course, in meditation, we're not dealing with the physical level. But often they can work together well, yes. So yes, in fact, you'll be doing a couple of meditations in this course, not so much about healing, but, well, certainly healing in terms of healing the mind, in terms of purifying the mind, but we won't be doing any practices moving energies or anything like that. That's not part of an introduction course.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about this stabilizing meditation, because this is what you're going to start with tomorrow morning before breakfast, so you sort of understand what we're trying to do here. And then these we'll start to explain in the coming days. But we need to talk about this because that's where you're starting first thing tomorrow morning. So let's have a look at that now. And of course, this stabilizing meditation is what you'll be doing before breakfast session and also a little bit in the evening session. And this discursive or analytical type of meditations you'll be doing more in the sort of afternoon sessions and also a little bit in the evening sessions as well. In fact, you'll be doing a little bit of that in each one of the 3 sessions with Felipe in the coming days. So let's have a look now at this stabilized meditation, the Shamatha practice. So again, this is the practice of simply cultivating a very calm, clear and focused mind. Or in other words, developing our attention skills. Actually, any of you who've had some little bit of experience with any of the Theravada Buddhist traditions probably have never heard this word Shamatha, because in the Theravada Buddhist traditions, this practice is not called Shamatha practice, it's called jhana practice, practicing the jhanas, but it's the same practice, different name. So here in Shamatha training, we're going to go through 2 things. First, we're going to look at the actual practice. And of course, any practice we do always has 2 parts. The 2 parts of any practice is the actual meditation and what we do for the rest of the day. And often people sort of forget about this second one. And they diligently meditate every day on whatever they're doing, but then the rest of the day they run around like crazy and they wonder why they're not getting anywhere. So if we want any practice to progress, we need to have a meditation practice where we're internalizing, but then we need to do something that supports that for the rest of the day. Otherwise, if we run around like crazy, whatever little benefit we receive here doing meditation will get eroded by running around and reacting all day long. So we're going to talk a little bit about this through the coming days, but particularly on the last day of the course, we're going to talk about how to bring a lot of these things into daily life, because this is very important. And I'll talk a bit more about meditation shortly. But the other thing we're going to look in the training is the stages of progress, meaning how do I know if I'm progressing and where am I in the practice? So in any practice we do, it'd be good to know, where am I making progress or not? And so there, in your booklet there's a nice little diagram that we're going to look at here, I think on day 7. What are the stages of progress in this practice? How do we know where we are in the practice? So what I'd like to do now is have a look at meditation. And any meditation we do also has 2 parts. Preparation and the actual meditation. And again, very often when people meditate, they either don't do this at all or they don't do it properly. And then they wonder why their actual meditation is not going very well. So preparation is all about preparing ourselves well at the beginning of each meditation session. And I'll explain some parts of what that means shortly. But if we don't do this, and we just sit down and start meditating, generally it doesn't go well. It's a little bit like if you wanted to run a 100-metre sprint, but you don't warm up, it's probably not going to go very well. So similarly here, the preparation is to prepare ourselves well at the beginning of every meditation session so that we can have the best situation to do the actual meditation. So preparation, what's involved there? We can talk about three things. We can talk about preparing body, speech, and mind. So, of course, preparing body is all about setting up a good posture to meditate. And there are a few things I'll mention about posture, but in general, two things are very important with posture. One is to keep the back nice and straight. Because if the back's not straight and you're sitting here like this to meditate, you're probably just going to catch up on some sleep. And at a more subtle level, we have a lot of energies in the body, and if you're like this, they don't flow very well, and that's going to create problems. So if you have the back straight, things flow a little bit better in the body. So back straight, and the other second important thing is to allow the entire body to become completely relaxed. Completely relaxed. But just to mention a couple of things about posture, and I'm sure Felipe will also mention again some important points tomorrow morning, so to remind you. First, what to do with your legs when in your posture. So the ideal position is what's called the full lotus, where you put one foot on opposite thighs like this. I think for most of us in the modern world, we're not flexible enough to do that. And so then they say, okay, if you can't do that, do half lotus. One foot underneath and the other on top. But again, for most of us in the modern world, that's not possible. We're not flexible enough. So most of us end up sitting cross-legged, which is fine. But many of us in the modern world are not very flexible. So when we sit cross-legged, we end up sitting here like this, something, knees sticking up in the air. And that's not very good for at least two reasons. One is that it tends to put a lot of strain on the lower back. And then also it's not very stable. So if you're sitting cross-legged and you're not flexible and your knees are sticking up in the air, what I really would recommend is add more cushions so that your knees are at least level with your hips, ideally touching, so you have 3 points of contact. Then it's much more stable. And also, if you're not very flexible and you're not sitting on enough cushions, what you're probably finding is that you'll need to strain to keep your back straight, and then it keeps collapsing. So that's a sure sign we're not flexible in the groin and the knees. So add more cushions so that your back is naturally straight. You're not having to strain to keep it straight, you're collapsing. And also there's, Felipe will talk about this tomorrow, there's these meditation stools over there. Because sometimes people have damaged knees and they sit cross-legged, is just painful because they've damaged their knees. So then you can use a meditation stool, which Felipe will explain how to do that tomorrow morning. You can tuck your legs underneath. And that also gives you a little bit more height as well to sit more upright. So that's also good for the back. Sometimes when people sit cross-legged, the circulation gets cut off and one or both legs go numb. So then you can experiment a little bit with adjusting that, and maybe even have a little thin cushion between the legs so they're not pressing so hard on each other, or have a little cushion under one knee so it's not pushing down on the leg so much. Another option is, instead of crossing the legs, you can have one in front of the other, sometimes called the Burmese posture, so you might like to try that. One foot in front of the other. And of course, if you have knee problems, there's chairs, a number of people already in chairs, so it's fine sitting in a chair. But of course, most chairs are not designed for meditating, they're designed for slouching, so we sit in a chair and we sort of meditate like this, so that's not very good. So if the chair is not supporting the back, then you can even put a little cushion in the lower back to support that, so it's straight, so you're not collapsing in the chair. And if you're sitting in a chair, put your feet flat on the floor. not crossing them over or anything. Okay. What to do with the hands? Often in Tibetan Buddhism, thing that's taught is you place your right palm in the left, thumbs touching, and you rest them in your lap. And that is symbolising, the left side is symbolising wisdom, the right side is symbolising compassion. Thumbs touching is symbolising we're practising wisdom and compassion together, and just resting in your lap. But if you find that uncomfortable, you can just put your hands on your knees, that's fine, no problems. The eyes, what to do with the eyes? In general, the general recommendation is to have them at least slightly open, because if we have them closed, for us that usually is associated with sleep, so we close our eyes and we get very drowsy. So have them slightly open. But here I think during this course we can be a little bit flexible, meaning that if you're the sort of person who tends to get more agitated than dull, and if you have the eyes open you may find you get more agitated, then you can close them. But if you're a sort of person that more generally gets more dull than agitated, I wouldn't recommend meditating with eyes closed. You're just going to get very dull and sleepy. So then have the eyes at least slightly open. And a little bit later in the course, I'm going to introduce a couple of shamatha practices where it's very much recommended to have the eyes open, and for particular reasons, but we'll talk about that later. So for now, for the next coming days, you can experiment with the eyes. If you're finding that with the eyes a little bit open, you're getting very agitated, close them. If you find that you're open and closed, you're getting very dull, then open them a little bit. So you can play with that. And similarly, the head position. If your head is too low and you're getting sleepy, then elevate a little bit. Or if it's too high and you're going to be agitated, lower a bit so you can adjust the head position a little bit as well. And of course everything nice and relaxed in the body. But again, Felipe will talk a little bit more about that tomorrow morning. So that's a little bit about posture. Question about posture? Anything not clear?
Can you repeat what to do with the hands?
Yeah, so this again is just what's often taught in Tibetan Buddhism, is you place your right palm in the left, thumbs touching and resting in the lap. So we're not trying to hold them up here. That's really takes a lot of effort. So you rest them in your lap. And it's also, whatever you're doing with your arms, it's good to have a little bit of air coming through, because if we're sitting here like this, it gets a bit stuffy. So when you like this, have them open, or of course, if your hands on your knees, a lot of ventilation through there. So yeah, right and left, thumbs touching, resting in the lap. But again, the most important thing is to have them relaxed.
Seiza, no seiza, that means it's Japanese saying like this.
Oh, yeah, you mean on your knee, on your feet.
Yeah.
Well, if you're used to that, that's fine, but I think for most people that puts a lot of pressure on the knees, and also sometimes a lot of pressure on the ankles because you're pushing down. But if you're used to that and you're happy to do that, that's fine. But I think for most people that a better option than that would be the meditation stool, so you're not pushing down on your knees, on your ankles rather. But if you're happy, if you're comfortable, then that's fine. There was a question over here somewhere. No?
About the eyes, where to look?
You're not looking anywhere. I mean, it's a bit like, sometimes in daily life, we're caught up in a daydream. We're daydreaming about something, and often our eyes are open. We're not really looking at anything, are we? Because we're so caught up in the daydream. So you're basically just letting some light in, but you're not really looking at anything. You're just resting there because you're focusing on the meditation, a little bit like that. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of days' time, about the eyes open instructions.
Thank you.
Do you mind to repeat what represents the left hand is wisdom?
Wisdom, and the right side is compassion. The two main wings of practice.
Should be always on the top of
Well, yeah, but in some traditions they do the opposite. So, but again, this is just the convention in Tibetan Buddhism. I think was it Zen or I don't know, one other tradition I saw they did the opposite, but it's fine. It's not like one's better than the other. It's just symbolism. That's all.
And we sit like in this Vajrasana, like this.
like doing meditation.
Yeah, that was what he was saying over there. So if you're used to that, that's fine. If you find that comfortable, that's fine, sure. Okay. Preparing speech. Speech here doesn't mean verbal chit-chat, it means mental chit-chat. Sometimes we come into meditation and our mind is going blah, 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 blah. And often it can be quite negative, sort of agitated, negative state of mind. So therefore, preparing speech is, and when you come in particularly with a negative state of mind, it's hard to bring that into a positive state. So what we can do here is we can do a little breathing exercise. Because if we do a little breathing exercise, focusing on the breathing for a few breaths, that can help us to let go of that negative blah, blah, blah mind and bring the mind into a neutral state. And this breathing exercise can take a number of different forms. Some traditions say take 3 deep breaths. Other traditions say count 21 breaths. In Tibetan Buddhism, sometimes here they talk about this 9-round breathing exercise, which can involve very elaborate visualizations together with that. And that's a little bit beyond the context of this course. But whether we do 3 deep breaths, count 21 breaths, or this 9-round breathing exercise, in the preparation they have all the same purpose. That is, by focusing on some little breathing exercise, it can help us to let go of that negative blah, blah, blah mind and bring the mind into a more neutral state. Preparing the mind is 2 things, really. One, of course, is to set a good motivation for the practice, but also to bring the mind into the present moment. Because very often we are living in the past and the future. So we need to bring the mind into the present moment. And very often what we find is at the beginning of the meditation, already we're jumping into the future. Because we're already going, I hope this happens. I hope that doesn't happen. I wonder what's going to happen in this meditation. So we're already jumping into the future. So we need to, one thing that can help bring us into the present moment at the beginning of a practice is if you notice you're coming into the meditation with any sort of expectation about getting any sort of experience, we need to drop that immediately. Because if we come into meditation with any expectations or worries about this may happen, this may not happen, we're already in the future. So we need to drop all of that and bring the mind into the present moment. And then we can begin the meditation. So this is a little bit of preparing body, speech and mind. And so again, I think Felipe is going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow morning. And also in the first few meditation sessions is really emphasize this preparation. Maybe even do it a little bit longer than normal, just so that we know what the steps are and we really prepare ourselves well. So this is very important if we want the actual meditation session to go well. Question?
Yeah. For the speech preparation part, you mentioned different kind of breathing techniques. And is there any other kind of speech preparation?
Well, again, it's really about letting go. So if you can let go, just simply, if you notice that, just release, 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 the blah, 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 that would be preparing speech as well. But people find that very difficult. So that more easy is to focus on something in the body, the breath, because you're going out of the blah, blah, blah mind into the body. I mean, if you can just let go, great, but often people find that not so easy because they're caught up in that blah, blah, blah. So to help us to let go of the blah, 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 it's best to give yourself a different focus, and particularly the body. Get into the body. Because the body is non-conceptual. It's physical. So it's much better. Okay. So that's preparation. So what I'd like to briefly do now is look at the actual meditation session. And particularly here, of course, we're talking about Shamatha practice. So in the actual Shamatha meditation, there are 3 things I'd like to cover now briefly. and that is, what qualities are we trying to cultivate in this practice? And remember, this practice is we're trying to develop single-pointed concentration, which means we're focusing on an object in this practice. So what object should we focus on in this practice? And then what tools do we use in this practice to help us to do the practice? So I want to cover these very briefly, because these also, of course, very important in being able to do the practice. So first, what qualities are we cultivating in this shamatha practice? So remember, in this practice, we're developing single-pointed concentration. So generally in the meditation texts here, two qualities are mentioned that we are cultivating. The first is stability, meaning to be able to focus on an object without becoming distracted. So that's what it means by stability. The stable mind, to be able to focus without becoming distracted. So the fault we're trying to overcome here, of course, is distraction. But not only do we want to have a stable mind, i.e. to be able to focus on an object without becoming distracted, we want to be able to focus on that object in a very clear way. In other words, clarity. And so the fault we're trying to overcome here is dullness. To be able to focus on an object in a very clear way. So these are usually the two qualities that are described in the meditation texts. But there's a third quality that you normally don't see in the meditation text, but I think it's something that is very important for us in the modern world. And that is the quality of relaxation. In the modern world, we all tend to lead very hectic, busy, fast-paced lives, and we're constantly bombarded by stimulus. And so our minds tend to be very chaotic. And so what do? Whenever we want to focus on something, some object or task, what do? We tense. We tense. And unfortunately, that sort of works a little bit. If we tense, we can focus better. But we know from our own experience, if we focus on something with a lot of tension for a longer period of time, we become completely exhausted and we often become very agitated. So this is not a sustainable method of focus. And unfortunately, this is what we bring to meditation. And also, unfortunately, in this very practice, one of the very first instructions you'll see is the text says, firmly tighten your focus on the object. And we go, yep, I can do that. And we go, clamp down hard, like we normally do. And then, of course, what happens is we get distracted within a few seconds. And we think, oh, the reason I got distracted is I didn't clamp down hard enough. So we come down and clamp down even harder. And then we wonder why we get headaches from meditating. I mean, some people say they get headaches from meditating. Just way too tight, way too tense. So the very first thing we need to do in this and any meditation practice is we need to learn to relax, to overcome this tension. Probably the main reason we have difficulties as a beginner in meditation is simply this. We're too tight, we're too tense, we're simply trying too hard. And then when we try hard and things don't go well, we think, oh, the reason is I need to try harder. So we do even more. And then we get exhausted and we get headaches and we say, oh, I can't meditate. So this is something I think Felipe is going to emphasize in particularly the first few days, is relax. I mean, if all you manage to do in the next 10 days is learn to relax a little bit, success. I mean, really success. Because no meditation practice is going to be sustainable with tension. We really need to have a very relaxed body and a very relaxed mind. The more relaxed we are, the better. Now, what we tend to do is we oscillate between two extremes in our life. Either we're focused and tense, or we're relaxed and dull and half asleep. So what we're trying to do is combine those two, to be super relaxed and completely alert and focused. That's something new we have to develop. We're not used to doing that. But if we develop that, you'll find your meditation will go much better, and you'll find that everything you do in your life will be much easier, much more effective. So with these qualities, that's where we need to start. There's no point in trying to having a more stable and clear mind if we're tense. It's just not going to work. So we need to emphasize these in this order. First, establish a basis in relaxation, a relaxed body and mind. Then we work on improving stability of attention. Then with a more stable mind, we then work on improving clarity of attention. And so these are the process that we're going to go through in the coming mornings. Is first relaxation, then more stability, then more clarity. Any questions about that?
Sorry, I didn't understand what you mean with clarity.
Clarity means to focus very clearly.
On something.
Well, in this practice it's an object. We haven't talked about what that object is yet. I mean, in daily life, of course, it would be whatever you're doing is to focus clearly. Because, you know, if we're half asleep and you're trying to focus on something, it doesn't go very well, does it? So this is dullness.
It looks like you did not consider duration. You did not consider duration as one of the qualities. Duration, time.
Yeah, that's not a quality. We're going to talk about that later. It's not really a quality. It's part of the process of meditating, and that we'll talk about that later. That's still to come.
Dullness, is that confusion?
Sorry.
Dullness. What does dullness mean?
Dullness. Well, very heavy dullness is we meditate, we fall asleep. So that's very heavy dullness. The next level up is we're not quite asleep, but we've completely disengaged. We're not aware of anything. We're sort of in this dull state. The next level up is we're sort of aware of the object, sort of, kind of, but most of the time we're sort of like this. The next level up is where we're sort of aware, we can focus on the object, but the mind is sort of quite heavy. The next level up is we're better focusing on the object, but still there's a little bit of sinking going on. The next level up is we're sort of focusing quite well on the object, but it's not very clear. The next level up, we're focusing and it's quite clear. The next level is we're focusing, it's very clear. And so there are many levels of dullness. And we'll talk more about that in the coming days.
Just to check if I got it right, are these three qualities the things that we have to learn through our practice, or the things that we have to actually check?
Well, I mean, we're both. We're cultivating this, and one of the tools is we need to check, which is this is to come now. I'm going to talk about that now. But yes, we have to learn to relax the body-mind. We have to learn to stabilise. We have to learn to make the mind more clear. And these tools are going to help us to do that, which I'm going to talk about shortly. Okay, so let's now look at objects. So here in this practice of Shamatha, we're developing single-pointed concentration, which means in this practice we're focusing on an object. But the question is, what object should we focus on? And in the meditation text here, when this practice is explained, you get a long list of possible choices. But in this course, we're going to focus on three. All three are extremely beneficial for us, particularly in the modern world. The first one that we're going to use is the breath. In other words, the sensations of the breath. And this is the one that is probably most widely emphasized in most Buddhist traditions for this practice. Focus on the breath. And there are a couple of variations of this breath practice we're going to work with in the coming days. The first one, tomorrow morning, will be what's called the full body breath practice. And that is simply noticing any sensations in the body associated with the breathing. That while you're breathing, through the process of breathing, if you notice any sensations in the abdomen, stomach, chest, throat, anywhere in this area. And for this one you can move around a bit. Just noticing any sensations connected with the process of breathing. And because this is a very sort of large area of focus, this is particularly good with working with relaxation. So again, the main emphasis tomorrow is with relaxation. So we're going to start with focusing on the breath, this full body breath practice. And again, Felipe will explain a little bit more about this tomorrow morning. The next breath practice we're going to do is to focus on the breath, sensations breath in the area of the abdomen. So this is particularly emphasized in a lot of Theravada Buddhist traditions. So we're focusing on the sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as we breathe. Again, a fairly large area of focus here. So this is particularly good for helping with stability of attention. Then we're going to move to focusing on the sensations that enter the nostrils. So this is also emphasized in many Buddhist traditions, focusing here at the entrance of the nostrils. So here, of course, we're bringing the attention up, and it's a much smaller area of focus. So this is particularly good for improving clarity of attention. So over the first 3 or so days, the coming 3 days, you're going to move through each of these practices and learn it and practice it. Then we're going to move to the second object, and that is to use the mind as the object of shamatha practice. And when we say the mind, what we mean is that we are observing our own mind and whatever is coming up in the mind. Thoughts, emotions, memories, images, and so forth. And we're simply observing our thoughts, emotions, and so forth as they arise and pass. Many of you will probably find this much more challenging than focusing on the breath for 2 reasons. One is the mind is a much more subtle object. The breath is a physical, tangible object, easier to focus on. And the second reason is many of us, particularly in the modern world, don't have a habit of observing our minds. We don't have a habit of observing our thoughts and emotions. What we do have a strong habit of doing is that as soon as a thought or emotion or something comes up, we grab it and off we go. We get caught up in our thoughts and emotions. The other strong habit we have in the modern world is if it's something unpleasant that comes up, some unpleasant thought, unpleasant emotion, unpleasant memory comes up, we often don't know how to deal with it, so what do? Stuff it back down, suppress. So that's our strong habit, either following or suppressing. And of course both of those means we get caught up in our thoughts and emotions. We are fighting with our thoughts and emotions and so forth. And so that's why we are the slaves of our mind in the modern world, because we get caught up either by following or trying to suppress. But in this practice, we are simply observing whatever's coming up. We're just observing it arise and pass. Rise and pass. And we will then become the masters of our own mind. Because every time you can just simply observe thoughts and emotions means you're not feeding them. Every time you get caught up or you suppress, you're feeding them. So the habit of them coming back will get stronger and stronger and stronger. And then people think, oh, okay, what I need to do is I need to fight with them. Fighting is suppressing. Fighting with our thoughts and emotions is like throwing petrol on a fire. They get worse. So that's our two options. We either give in and follow and get caught up and we suffer, or we fight and we suffer. And then we're stuck there. So the solution is just step back and watch. That's all we need to do. Nothing complicated. Nothing complicated. It's so simple. Not easy, but it's not easy simply because we don't have the habit. And so if we can just step back and watch, in fact, if you can watch your thoughts and emotions and memories, they can't harm us. Impossible. Because if you look at what a thought, emotion, or memory really is from its own side, it's nothing. It's virtually nothing. They have no power to harm us whatsoever. Thoughts, emotions, and memories only have power to harm us if we give them power. And we give them power either by getting caught up in them or trying to suppress them. Then they have a lot of power to harm us. But if we can just step back and watch, they can't do anything. And every time we watch, we're not feeding. Which means over time, your mind will naturally become more quiet and still. And then in future, if some strong thought, emotion, memory were to come up, we could be fully present with it without getting overwhelmed. So we really will become the masters of our own mind with this practice. So we're going to introduce and practice this in sort of the middle days of this course. And then there's a third object we're going to use. Awareness. Sometimes this is called shamatha with no object. Because in the breath practice, we are aware of the sensations of the breath. In the mind practice, we're aware of our thoughts, emotions, and so forth. In this third practice, what we're doing is we're turning awareness in upon itself and just simply knowing that we're aware. Many people find this even more challenging than the second practice, observing the mind. Not because it's complicated, but because it's too simple. It's too simple. Because this third practice basically involves doing nothing. Doing nothing. In the modern world, we don't know how to do nothing. We always want to do something. So when this practice is explained, people often go, yeah, but what am I supposed to do? Tell me what I've got to do. Doing is the problem. Stop doing. This is about being, not doing. So the harder we try in this, the worse it gets. Stop trying. Stop doing. Just be. That's it. All we need to do is just know we're aware. That's it. And of course I'll explain more about what that really means later. But why we're doing this practice in this course is, again, so much benefit for us in the modern world. Because, again, in the modern world, what is our default mode in daily life? Blah, 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 all day long. Non-stop. Non-stop. And then, of course, what happens is some little stimulus comes, we react. If it's pleasant, grab. Unpleasant, push. We're just reaction. Stimulus reaction machines, blah, 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 all day long. It's very tiring. This practice will give us a new default mode in daily life. Because if we can simply be, we can be resting in this awareness. What you notice is awareness is completely open and spacious. It's completely still, quiet. And if we can do this practice, we can bring that into daily life. Our default mode in daily life can be resting in stillness instead of blah, 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 blah all day long. And then if some stimulus comes, instead of just reacting, we'll be able to respond much more effectively to whatever comes our way in daily life. So instead of our mind being tight and constricted and reactive, it'll be open and spacious and still. Much better state for daily life. So we're going to look at this practice towards the end of this course. So all three of these practices, breath, mind, and awareness, very, very helpful for us in the modern world. So that's why we're going through these three variations. Again, each one of these will be explained in much more detail in the coming days, but anything not clear here before I talk a little bit about tools? Tools. What tools are we using in this practice? The first tool we use in this practice is mindfulness, which is a translation of the Sanskrit term smrti or the Pali term sati. And both smrti and sati literally mean memory, to remember. So mindfulness is our ability to remember the object. In other words, it's our ability to hold the object and not forget it. So often the symbolism, and we'll see this later in the course, that mindfulness is symbolized by a rope, that we're tying our mind with a rope of mindfulness to the object. We're holding the object with mindfulness. What we need to be aware of is that in a lot of modern day mindfulness traditions, they've redefined this word to mean something a little bit different. In a lot of modern mindfulness traditions, they often define mindfulness as something like a non-judgmental awareness of whatever is arising in the present moment. Very good thing to do. But this is not how the word mindfulness was originally defined. So we need to be aware of this difference of usage of how they use the word mindfulness. Here in Buddhism, mindfulness is simply our ability to hold the object, not to forget it. But then we need a second tool, because we need something to monitor that. We need some quality control. And so quality control is called introspection. So introspection, again, is quality control. Introspection is simply monitoring the mindfulness. How are we going? Are we still holding the object, or are we starting to become dull or distracted? So if we're noticing that we're becoming dull or distracted, then we just reapply mindfulness. So these are the two tools we use in this practice. Mindfulness to hold the object, introspection to monitor that, quality control. To monitor if we're becoming dull or distracted. And if we are, then reapply mindfulness, hold the object again. But again, more of this will come in the coming days. So that's all I wanted to cover on the Shamatha practice this evening. So I think that's more than enough. And Felipe will explain a few more of these things again tomorrow morning to start the practice. So any last questions?
What did you tell Sanskrit term for mindfulness?
Mindfulness is smrti, smrti, S-M-R-T-I. And sati in Pali. Any other questions?
More light about mindfulness.
Sorry, what was the question?
More light, what is mindfulness?
Mindfulness, yeah. So again, the Sanskrit and Pali word literally means to remember. To remember. So mindfulness is our ability to remember the object, to hold the object, to not forget it. So again, the symbolism often, mindfulness is symbolized by a rope. We're tying our mind with a rope to the object, whatever that is, the object, the breath or some object. So we're holding the object with mindfulness. So mindfulness is the main tool we use in this practice. So effectively in Shamatha practice we are strengthening mindfulness. The stronger the mindfulness, the better our ability to focus and concentrate. So we're really developing this, and the more we develop this, the more our ability to monitor that, it automatically improves. So this is sort of like secondary. But introspection is quality control, because we need to notice when we become dull or distracted, and that's what introspection does, is it monitors that mindfulness, noticing, are we still holding the object, or are we starting to become distracted or dull? And if we are, we reapply mindfulness, hold the object again.
What's the relationship between objects and tools?
Well, object is what we're focusing on, and tools is how we focus on the object. We're using mindfulness to focus on the object. to hold the object.
So we should say, focus on breath, mindfulness.
Yeah, so if we're focusing, if we're starting tomorrow, for example, on the breath, so the object is the sensations of the breath. How do we focus on that? Is we focus with what's called mindfulness. Mindfulness is to hold that focus. And then introspection is to monitor that. Are we still focusing on the sensations of breath, or are we starting to think about breakfast already? If we are, go back to focusing on the breath. Or are we falling asleep? Then focus on the breath again. So that's all I wanted to cover this evening. So just 1 or 2 last points and then we'll finish for the day. So again, particularly with the meditation sessions, but in general, the advice for these coming days is just be very relaxed. And as we've seen here, the basis of any meditation is relaxation. So really, and I think that's something Felipe will really emphasise in the first few days at least, is really just a very relaxed body and a very relaxed mind. The more relaxed, the better the basis we have for all meditation practices. And again, in these meditation practices, we're just simply learning the techniques. We're not trying to get some sort of profound meditative experiences. If we're having this sort of expectation, we're just going to get frustrated. So we're just learning the techniques. And whatever happens in meditation, don't get caught up in it. You know, if it's something pleasant, don't go, oh, I want that, or oh, God. Just keep to the practice. Keep to the practice. So for tomorrow, then, if you want to prepare a little bit what we're going to cover in the book, we're going to be covering page 1, 2, and 3. So page 1, 2, and 3. And then also, some of the things we've covered this evening about meditation is from page 16 to 19. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about meditation, particularly this stabilising meditation, analytical meditation, then there's quite a lot written there on page 16 and 19. And also on page 16 there is a section called What is the Mind? So that's also a topic we'll be looking at tomorrow, what is the mind? Because basically, within Buddhism, mind is key. Mind is central to everything. Because it's our mind that we're trying to transform. So if we're trying to transform the mind, it might be a good idea to know what is this mind that we're transforming. So we'll look at that a little bit tomorrow as well. So that's what we're going to cover tomorrow. So then, again, the silence starts now. So again, maintain that silence well. You'll get the most out of the course. Again, if you start talking, not only won't you get anywhere near as much, but you're going to spoil it for the people around you. So really maintain that well, and you'll certainly, and it's like I said, it's a rare opportunity, so let's take advantage of the opportunity we have here for this course. So that's it. Any last questions before we finish there for today? Yeah.
This is for us.
Yeah, so this is yours, so you can write notes in it as well. So this and the book you got at check-in is yours to keep. Any other book here you can read, but you need to bring it back, certainly at the end of the course. Oh, actually one thing I forgot earlier is we have this booklet also in Hebrew, so if there's anyone who would prefer the red booklet in Hebrew, put your hand up and Felipe will pass that around.
Some of us didn't get the book in the morning.
Sorry?
Do you know what we can do? Some of us didn't get the book.
The red one?
No.
Or the check-in?
Yeah.
Everyone should have got it at check-in.
I didn't get one either.
You didn't? They ran out?
I don't know.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so how many people didn't get one of these at check-in? Put your hand up.
I'll bring 10 of them tomorrow, I'll get them there.
Okay.
People can pick them up.
Okay, there we go. So Felipe's going to bring 10 copies over here tomorrow morning. You can pick it up there. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah. For the speech preparation part, I think about sound or scent can also help to clarify the mind.
Yeah. So we're going to talk more about this on the last day. In the last morning, we're going to talk a little bit about, when you go home, how to set up your environment where you meditate and so forth to prepare as well. So that's still to come on the last day of the course. Okay, so let's leave it there. So enjoy the course and relax. And Felipe, I'll see you at 6:45, and then I'll see you tomorrow morning at